Welcome to the Oral History Podcast, featuring stories from the oral history website voicesofoklahoma.com, where Oklahomans have given generously of their time to tell their life stories for present-day listeners and for generations to come. Our entire collection is available on the website voicesofoklahoma.com. Subscribe to be notified of new Oklahoma oral history podcasts. Here's another interesting storyteller from voicesofoklahoma.com. N. Scott Momaday, internationally acclaimed poet, novelist, playwright, storyteller, artist, and teacher, was born in Lawton, Oklahoma. He grew up in various communities in the Southwest as his teacher parents moved among reservation schools. He is enrolled in the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma, but also has Cherokee heritage from his mother. He received the Pulitzer Prize for fiction for his novel Housemaid of Dawn, which led to a writing renaissance for Native American literature. He is also the author of The Way to Rainy Mountain, Names, a memoir, and In the Bear's House, among many others, and holds a Ph.D. from Stanford University. Dr. Momaday was awarded the 2007 National Medal of Arts by former President George W. Bush and is the Oklahoma Centennial Poet Laureate. We thank our underwriters for making this oral history story available on voicesofoklahoma.com.
My name is John Erling. Today's date is December 21st, 2010. Scott, would you state your full name, please?
Navarre Scott Momaday.
Your date of birth?
February 27, 1934.
It makes your present age?
75.
Where are we recording this interview?
At my condominium in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the compound called Zocalo, on the north side of the city.
Where were you born?
I was born in Lawton, Oklahoma. The Kiowa Comanche Hospital, I think.
Your father was?
Alfred Morris Momaday, Mamadate, full-blood Kiowa.
And then your mother?
Yeah, Natachi Scott Momaday. She was basically English, Irish, French, and some degree of Cherokee.
And as we'll find out later on, she really embraced Cherokee.
Yes.
You refer to yourself and others as Indians.
Yes.
So the issue of Native America, is that important to you or to other Indians?
Oh, I think it's important, and I think that the two terms, American Indian and Native American, I think of them as being both acceptable. I say American Indian because my father did and his father did, so out of respect for them, I use that term.
Your ancestry, I believe you can trace back to about 1850 in Kentucky?
Yeah, my mother was born in Kentucky, and my grandfather, her father as well. I knew him, and then I didn't know the parentage before that, but a good part of it is in Kentucky.
Then your grandfather, Momaday, married your grandmother, and her name was?
Aho. That's the only Kiowa name that she had, as far as I know.
Did she maintain that name?
Yes.
Were you able to know them at all?
My paternal grandfather died the year before I was born, but I knew my grandmother quite well. She lived up into the 1960s. I used to visit her a good deal.
Wasn't there a story about your grandfather building a house for himself, his wife and children?
My father was born on the site. The house was under construction. He was born near the arbor of the house. That was 1913. Frame building with screens all around, dirt floor. It was a very cool and comfortable place in the summer.
Your father's Indian name was?
Juan Toe, Warlance.
And then he was christened as?
Alfred Morris Momaday.
What did your father do early on that you know about?
My grandfather was a farmer. He raised cotton. My father, of course, worked for him in the cotton fields. He grew up in that way, became interested in art very early on, so began that career when he was quite young. He took art very seriously, and he was very good at it.
Became a student at Bacone College?
He was a student at Bacone for a time, yes.
So your father may have learned about painting there. He helped the Creek artists.
Yes, I think he learned something there. He roomed with an artist, I know, a painter. So I think probably they were exchanging information and techniques and so on.
So then your mother, she was born where?
She was born in Kentucky, Fairview, Kentucky, western part of the state.
How did they come here to this area?
Well, my mother went to Haskell College in Lawrence, Kansas. A close friend there was a Kiowa girl and invited my mother to Mountain View, Oklahoma, where my father lived. Introduced them, and they fell in love and married.
There was a point where your father called you, used the last name Momaday, as from Momaday.
Yeah, Momaday. That was the family name. That was my grandfather's name, his only name. It became the surname of the family. And my father abbreviated it for some reason.
So your parents then were married in 1933, and they then lived at the place you made famous, Mountain View.
They lived there for a time. But it was during the Depression, and they were looking for work, and so they found it in New Mexico and moved here when I was very young.
And Mountain View, where is that?
Southwestern Oklahoma.
Then you were born at the Kiowa Comanche Indian Hospital in Lawton.
Yes.
And you were an only child.
Yes.
Some of your earliest memories.
I guess my earliest memories are of Mountain View and my grandmother and other members of the family. Then the next thing is New Mexico. I remember certain things about Shiprock, where we lived for a time, and so on.
Your first languages, what were they?
English has always been my first and only language. Kiowa I heard when I was very young, but I didn't learn it because I wasn't there long enough to really learn it. So English is the one language that I really have possession of, though I have smatterings of several other languages.
Early years, you lived in Gallup, New Mexico?
That's where my parents went when they came to New Mexico. They went to Gallup. That's where they found work with the Indian Service. They went first to Shiprock.
You did a lot of moving in that time period, 1936 to early 40s.
Yeah, I've moved around quite a bit, and even as a child, my parents and I were moving about the country.
Is that job-related?
Yeah, with the Indian Service, but various jobs under that rubric.
This became a school issue for you, no doubt.
Yes, I went to several schools when I was very young. I lived at several places on the Navajo. The first place we lived was Shiprock on the Navajo reservation, and also we lived at Chinle and Tuba City. I was in different schools, of course, along that way, and it seems that I was always going to another school when I was growing up.
How did that affect you?
I have no idea what effect that might have had. I do know that very frequently I was the only student in my class who spoke unbroken English. So I had an advantage of a kind, and probably not much of a challenge. I wasn't challenged a great deal when I was in the early grades.
Because the students were speaking mostly what?
Well, their first language was native. Navajo at first, and I lived at Jemez Pueblo, and I lived at Jicarilla. So they were speaking their Athabascan languages, their Pueblo languages.
So you were the star of the class.
I had little difficulty in those days.
You were able to get along with all these students. You were learning to be very social at an early age.
Yes, I got along quite well with my peers. I still have friends who I remember from those days.
1941, December 7th. You would have been about 7 years old. Do you have any recollection of that announcement?
I don't know whether I remember the day or whether I remember being told about it.
Did the war affect your family? Do you remember the rationing?
Oh, yeah. In fact, my family took a break, as it were, at that time from the Indian Service, and they went to work, I like to say, for the war effort. My dad was an artist, of course, and he was an excellent draftsman, and he got work with oil companies. I think he was with Conoco for some time, and we moved to Hobbs, New Mexico, southeastern part of the state. There was an Army air base there, and my mother worked at the air base. We lived there for several years, and then went to Jemez.
And in this time period, your father was a great storyteller.
Yeah, he knew a lot of oral tradition from the Kiowa. He was a good storyteller.
As a young child, were you taken with that? Were you interested in it, or just thought that these are old stories my father's telling me?
I was greatly interested. They were wonderful stories. I took them for granted, of course, until much later in my life, when I realized that they were very fragile and on the verge of extinction. But yes, I remember him telling me stories at bedtime, and I would frequently ask him to tell a certain story. I made him tell some stories again and again and again. So, Yeah, that was a rich part of my boyhood. My mother also told stories, not from the Indian tradition so much, but stories she just made up to tell. She was a good storyteller as well.
It led to you being a storyteller?
Yes, I had that in my background, fortunately. I am very fortunate.
It was a Kiowa home that you were growing up in. Through this whole moving, you had to maintain a certain identity. Or was that confusing to you?
You know, I didn't think so much about the tribal identity when I was moving around as a young child. I knew that I was Indian, and that identity was the principal one. I didn't think of myself as a Kiowa in those days so much as an Indian.
In 1946, you made a move to the Pueblos.
Yes, from Hobbs. My mother had found work as a teacher at Jemez. She agreed to take the job if my father could join her. So she went first to Jemez, and then my father and I, a little bit later, joined her there, and my parents became the teachers at the two-teacher day school at Jemez. He was the principal, and my mother was a teacher. She taught the first 3 grades, and he taught the second 3 grades.
So would this Jemez be maybe the best home of your childhood?
It was certainly a place that was influential in my boyhood. I think I lived there during my most impressionable years, and I love the place, still do. I think it was an ideal kind of childhood I had there.
Because your experience there from Jemez is seen in your work.
Yes, I've written about Jemez, and it remains a vital part of my experience, a place that I'll always find friendly and comfortable, secure.
Jemez in New Mexico, just exactly where is that?
Jemez Pueblo is north and west of Albuquerque, about 65 miles.
Although it seems you and your parents grew close to the people of the Pueblo, is it true that you still were perhaps outsiders because you really weren't New Mexico Indian?
I think anybody who goes to a Pueblo is going to be an outsider in the sense that there is so much secret activity in the tribe. So my parents were, they were excluded from secret ceremonies, of course, but they were welcomed as Indians. And I think I had a much closer relationship with the Pueblo in a way because of my age. I was going to school with peers and they were Pueblo and I was not, but it didn't matter much because we were all in the same boat, studying the same things and learning about each other.
Would New Mexico Indians consider Indians, say, from Oklahoma as not really Indian?
No, they considered them Indian, and they still have very close relationships with Indians from outside.
When do you remember consciously writing anything of substance?
I guess probably during my high school years. And when I got into college, I was very much determined to be a poet, and I was writing what I thought was poetry. I was entering contests, that sort of thing. That's really where I think the writing career began.
So it wasn't until high school that you began writing?
Well, I was probably doing some things before that, but they didn't amount to much, and I don't remember them particularly.
And so going into high school, would you have thought, I'm thinking I like writing so much that...
Well, it's because my mother was a writer, and so, I grew up in a creative household. My father was a painter, my mother was a writer. I'm sure by osmosis I got a lot of things. But yes, I thought of being a writer when I was quite young. It seemed to me a very romantic idea and something I'd like to do. I didn't do it until I was in college, really, and I started writing poetry.
As we've said, many of the events in Jemez made their way into Housemaid of Dawn, for example, like the Feast of San Diego.
Yes.
And what is the Feast of San Diego?
Well, each of the pueblos has a principal feast day, and they have a patron saint. And San Diego is the patron saint of Jemez, so his feast day is November 12th, and that is the principal feast at Jemez.
And then the chicken pull, what was that?
That was a game and had religious significance. It is a Spanish tradition, and it happened at Jemez, of course, once or twice a year. It was very, very thrilling to watch. You had to be an excellent horseman to take part in the game. And so I saw that a number of times when I was living there, and it was very exciting to see. And then I think through the years it deteriorated and became something for the children rather than for the men in their prime. I don't know how it's observed today, if it is at all.
Also, something you drew on was the killing of the goose. That also provides a subject of Angle of Geese.
That's a poem, yes, and I based that on an incident in which I went with my father and one of his friends hunting, and we found geese on the river at Hamus. One of the men, I still don't know which one, shot and killed a goose, and I had to go and retrieve it from the river, carry it, and it died in my arms. It made a great impression upon me, and I wrote about it.
Do you think to yourself how this was all meant to be, how you ended up in New Mexico and all this, and then you used all those experiences forever and ever? It's just amazing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and I do feel that very keenly, yeah.
You spent your final year of high school at a military school in Virginia. Why a military school?
Well, I had gone to so many schools. I went to 4 different high schools, as a matter of fact. And I had gone to all those schools on the reservations when I was little. So as I was approaching college age, I thought I don't really have any preparation for college. So I talked to my parents about this, and we decided that I would spend my senior year at a prep school. My mother had a rich tradition of Southern life coming from Kentucky, so I had a romantic idea of Virginia and its history, very rich history. So we sent for catalogs, and I chose Augusta Military Academy in Fort Defiance, Virginia, and that's where I spent my senior year.
So overall, that was a good experience for you?
Yeah, it was a good experience.
The rigidness of a military academy, was that something you had to deal with?
Yes, and I didn't mind at the time. I thought I might, but I fell right into the groove, and it turned out to be a fine year for me, an interesting year. A lot was compressed into that year.
You were able to work on your writing skills?
No, not particularly my writing skills. I remember that I entered a speaking contest in Baltimore and represented the school there. I think took 3rd place or something. But I wasn't writing at that time. I was much too busy with the schoolwork and so on.
Was this a surprise to you that all of a sudden you realized, hey, I can get up in front and I can speak? Or was it difficult for you? You had to gain confidence doing that?
Yes, I had some experience. I think in one summer before my senior year, I took part in a kind of forensic, not a contest so much as a kind of seminar at the University of New Mexico. And I got interested in speaking, and I found that I could do it pretty well. I had a little experience before.
So then you go on to the University of New Mexico.
Yes.
Also a stint at the University of Virginia, where you met a gentleman by the name of William Faulkner.
Yes, I met William Faulkner.
Nobel Prize-winning American novelist, short story writer. To put him into perspective, he was one of the important writers of Southern literature, along with Mark Twain, Truman Capote, Tennessee Williams, Flannery O'Connor. He was a pretty good stature.
Yeah. He was, yes, quite widely recognized at that time.
He obviously had an influence on you. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think he must have. I know that one of my most successful poems was based upon his short story, The Bear. I have read widely in Faulkner. I admire his writing. So I'm sure he was an influence, but I can't say how and in what way exactly.
Some osmosis going on here, huh?
I think so, yeah. But he came to speak at the University of Virginia when I was there. I think he had a daughter in school there, and she prevailed upon him to visit, and he did. John Dos Passos came at the same time, so I was fortunate to meet both of them. But that's about as far as the acquaintanceship went.
Okay, so he didn't know of your work.
No.
But you were obviously taken with him.
Yeah, I admired him very much.
One of the defining moments in your life would be when you won a scholarship in creative writing to attend Stanford.
Yeah, that was a very important event in my life. I had graduated from the University of New Mexico, and I had taken a job teaching on the Hickory Apache Reservation at Dulce, New Mexico. I spent a very happy year there, single and independent. During the course of that year, I applied for a Stegner Fellowship at Stanford, and I won it. So I began my graduate career that way. I went to Stanford. I had the notion that I'd go there for a year, the term of the fellowship, and come back to my job at Dulce. But as it is, I fell into the routine of graduate work at Stanford, and I stayed there for my master's and doctorate.
You were, as I understand it, selected for that award by someone who you came to admire.
Yes, Ivor Winters was the man in poetry. He was a poet and a critic and a wonderful man. He chose me out of the group of applicants, and I was the only poet that year at Stanford in the Stegner Fellowship. That's really, I think, where my career as a poet began.
He had a very long interest in Indian poetry.
He had an interest in all kinds of poetry. He was wonderfully erudite, and he knew a good deal about English traditional forms, for example. So I learned a lot from him in the 4 years I was there.
What kind of a person was he?
He was a sweet man, but he had a terrible reputation as a critic because he suffered no fools. He was very straightforward about his opinions of literature. And so he came down hard on certain people like Emerson and Whitman. This, of course, put him in a certain area of scrutiny. But he was right, I think. He stuck by his guns. He had the strength of his convictions. Became a very important man in my life.
Was he quite critical at times of your work?
Well, he could be. He was at the beginning especially. And then as we got to know each other, he became less critical and more supportive.
He influenced your work, especially your early work, a period of time referred to as post-symbolist.
Well, he thought that there was a kind of writing that succeeded the symbolist movement. He was very much interested in that, more interested than I was, but that was one of the things that he was known for.
Would a poem that would be post-symbolist be Angle of Geese from your first published collection?
Yes.
How shall we adorn recognition with our speech? Now the dead firstborn will lag in the wake of words. The poem describes two events that maybe we can talk about.
Exactly. Well, I had a close friend in high school. I spent my sophomore year at St. Mary's High School in Albuquerque. There I became good friends with a boy who later committed suicide. But he had a child, an only child, who died in a terrible accident. So that informs the first part of that poem. And then the second, in obvious ways related, the story of the goose that I carried in my arms until it died. So those two things inform that poem. And Winters admired that poem very much, and I think of it as one of my landmark poems.
It occurs to me that I suppose all of us have very interesting things that happen in our life. It's not just Scott Momaday. However, it takes a certain mind to take those experiences and to write about them and make some meaning out of them, that most of us, we just don't do it. Would it be true? Because it sounds like you have this interesting life. Well, there are a lot of people who have interesting lives.
That's right. And I don't know why. I think writers are compelled to write, and they have to write out of their experience because it's all they have. And so that makes for a crucial difference between people who are driven to write and people who aren't.
Oh, the material that is wasted then, huh?
Yeah. Who knows what stories there may be out there.
You received your doctorate at Stanford in 1963 and then joined the English department at the University of California at Santa Barbara. There you designed a course that I'd like for you to talk about in American Indian Studies.
Well, I had this great interest in oral tradition, the Native American oral tradition. So yes, I developed a course in that subject. Taught it for a great many years. I took it with me to Berkeley. Then again, I went back to Stanford on the faculty after a time. Then to the University of Arizona, where I ended my teaching career. And I taught oral tradition, American Indian oral tradition, in all of those schools and almost every year that I was on duty. So I have a rich background in oral tradition.
When you say you taught it, what were you teaching?
We were looking at examples of oral tradition, stories and songs in American Indian oral tradition, talking about how they were formed, composed, mostly how they compared to what we call poetry in English.
This all had to be recalled. because it wasn't written down.
That's right. Some of it, of course, had been transcribed. So when I wrote The Way to Rainy Mountain, for example, that became an introduction to oral tradition. But we were using a book. So we had a first-hand experience of the oral and written tradition. That's really how I formulated my course. We talked about the two traditions and how they related to each other and the advantages that each had over the other.
While you were there, you compiled a collection of traditional Kiowa stories.
Yeah, I had collected a number of these things, mostly from my father. Two of my colleagues at Santa Barbara and I decided to make a book, and my collection of Kiowa oral tales became the text of the book.
And the name of that was?
The Journey of Taimé.
What is Taimé?
Taimé is the Sundance fetish and most powerful medicine in the Kiowa tribe. It's a sacred fetish which was exposed during the Sundance and then only.
Taimé was kept in a rawhide bundle.
Yes.
And had not been displayed.
No, in a number of years. 1887 was the last Kiowa Sundance, and in 1889 there was one planned, but it was prohibited. Yeah, so it must have been secreted all that time. I did see the bundle, but not the fetish within it.
The fetish, what is that?
We think it's a doll. No one really knows. We think it's a wooden stick-like figure adorned with feathers and other objects, but no one can say. No one alive today has seen it.
You viewed the bundle.
Yes.
Describe that feeling for you, knowing you were viewing something that goes back so many years.
It was a deeply religious experience for me. I went with my father to the place where the bundle was kept. We were allowed to go into the room where it was hanging in a closet from a tree. We made an offering to it. That was the customary way you approached the bundle. And it was very moving. My grandmother was with me and my father, and she prayed in Kiowa to the bundle, and it was just, I can't tell you how moving it was. It meant a great deal to me.
How old were you about this time?
Oh, I was well into my adulthood. I was a grown man.
That was unusual to have someone view the bundle.
Particularly for me, because I had not grown up in the tribe with the traditions of the tribe. But yes, fairly unusual.
One thing always leads to another, because in writing The Journey of Taimé, that then expanded into The Way to Rainy Mountain.
Exactly.
And then on into Housemaid of Dawn and The Ancient Child.
It came just after Housemaid of Dawn.
Housemaid of Dawn, another moment in your life that was life-changing, I think, because this, you won a Pulitzer Prize for it in 1969. It was your first literary success. Let's talk about that for a moment. We can back up even before. When you were in the midst of this work, did you realize, I have something going here?
Yes, in a sense I did. I knew I had a story, and I had lived that time of my life at Jemez Pueblo, which is the setting of Housemaid of Dawn. And I knew people who had returned from the Second World War, and they were, a particular generation of misfits. They had seen the world outside the traditional one, and it had a strong effect upon them. They returned to the traditional world, having been uprooted, and they had a hard time getting back into it, and that's basically the subject of Housemaid of Dawn.
Housemaid of Dawn, how did that title come about?
It's a line, the beginning line of a song in Navajo ceremony. The ceremony is called the Night Chant, and the song begins, Housemaid of Dawn, housemaid of evening light, housemaid of pollen, so on.
The book centers around Abel, an Indian veteran, right?
Right.
And then the problems you've already referred to in World War II. His name, is there a biblical link here, because you don't give him a last name?
Only in a very superficial sense. I actually knew a man at Jemez named Abel, and I was thinking of him when I wrote this character. But the biblical reference, it was also there, but not, I think, important.
Abel then, not to tell the whole story, obviously, but is convicted for his crime, and he serves an 8-year sentence. The government relocates him in Los Angeles, where he meets this minister.
Yes.
The Reverend John Big Bluff Tosama. How did you come up with this name?
I don't know. I invented it. It's close to some Indian names. In Kiowa, I think there's a Tonama and other such names. Tosa is a common name in Hamas. So I think I just put a couple of things together and came up with Tosama.
And he was pastor of the Storefront Indian Church. He was pastor and priest of the Sun at the Los Angeles Holiness Pan Indian Rescue Mission.
Exactly. Yes. I like that title. And he's an interesting character, the peyote priest, Tosama, who is the pastor of this mission, and becomes a kind of foil for the hero, Abel.
And then it said in The Housemaid of Dawn, the hero Abel, while he's a self-destructive alcoholic person, he's made into this very complex character, sympathetic. Maybe you've created him to be that way. Mm-hmm. We have these two images going of him. That was your main goal, to make him feel there's more to this man than he's just an alcoholic?
Yeah, sure. There's more to him than that. His counterparts bring certain things out of him, certain virtues. His friendship with the Navajo friend, and even Tosama, though they are in some ways diametrically opposed, they have something to teach each other. And that's one of the fragments of the story.
And his sermon, Tosama's sermon on the book of John, is interesting. If you will read.
In the beginning was the Word, and man, right then and there, he should have stopped. Old John was a white man, and the white man has his ways. He talks about the Word. He talks through it and around it. He builds upon it with syllables, with prefaces and suffixes and hyphens and accents. He adds and divides and multiplies the Word, and in all of this, he subtracts the truth. Yeah, Tosama is a kind of protagonist, an antagonist, a very bright man, knows something about language and the force of it. That whole sermon is really about language.
The Housemaid of Dawn actually kicked off the American Indian literary renaissance. That must make you feel good, because before that book, 6 Indian authors had published a total of 9 novels. And then by the early 1990s, more than 30 Indians had published novels. So publishers said, wow, there's where the money is. Let's go after that.
Yeah. I do feel good about being a part of that movement. I think there are 2 books that were very influential in bringing to light the possibility of an American Indian literature. One was Housemaid of Dawn. The other was Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, which was a wonderful history of a 30-year period in American history. And they were both successful and I think made a difference. Convinced the publishing world that here is something we've overlooked and we can give this some emphasis.
I'm sure that as you look back in your life, this has to be a period that you put your head on the pillow at night and say, now that was good.
Yes, that's right. You're right about that. I've been fortunate enough to have several such experiences of having done something that made a difference.
Housemaid of Dawn. But then your next book, The Way to Rainy Mountain, that had combined stories you had published before in Housemaid of Dawn.
Yeah, The Way to Rainy Mountain is simply an elongation of the Journey of Taimé. The Journey of Taimé was done, as I mentioned, at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and it was a research project. We made that book, the 3 of us, my 2 colleagues and I, one being an art professor who specialized in etchings. He made a series of etchings for The Journey of Taimé, and the other partner was a typographer who designed a typeface. We made the book. We gathered the materials and printed the book on an old Washington hand press in the university art department. And that became a collector's item. We printed 100 copies and divided it 3 ways, and most of them have ended up in collections and libraries. That was the prototype of The Way to Rainy Mountain. I added commentaries to those stories, and my father illustrated The Way to Rainy Mountain. So that's sort of an interesting diversion into bookmaking. That's really what The Journey of Taimé was and is. But now there's a new edition of it just out.
Oh, really?
Through the University of New Mexico Press.
And it had to be a thrill to have your father illustrate your book.
Very, very much a thrill, and he was such a good artist. And these are all pen and ink drawings in The Way to Rainy Mountain. They add a very important dimension to the book.
It's interesting that you would kind of make a habit of using the same material time and again. I mean, other writers would repeat maybe themes or symbols, but you would use the same events and stories over and over again. There might be some people who think, oh, I've already done that. I need fresh new material. They're going to think that I'm just repeating. Did you think about what you were doing? You took the themes and made them deeper. But as a reader, as they went from one work to another, it was also, oh, I've read about this before.
Yeah, the simple answer to that is I have expressed the idea, my conviction, that there is only one story in the world. There are many stories in the one, but we all take part in that one story. We have our part to play. And so it seems perfectly natural to me that we retell stories, and they work in different contexts, and they shed light upon different situations. But they're all part of the same thing.
So then as you would think and get deeper and deeper into them, you saw things that you never could when you first...
Yeah, I'm sure that's true, yes.
The Way to Rainy Mountain was a series of, shall we say, fragments, poems, essays, myths, historical notes, that type of thing.
These are all stories. The commentaries, of course, are a different dimension. But the structure of The Way to Rainy Mountain is something that I am proud of, because I discovered that by going from myth, that is the folklore, the tale itself, the original oral tale, into history, which is the commentary, and then into memoir, which is the personal reminiscence. Those are the three voices that inform The Way to Rainy Mountain. And they constitute a wheel that seems to me is organic and indispensable to storytelling. That rotation, it's a never-ending wheel, and I think that's a wonderful thing to work with.
The theme, then, is the development and the decline of the Kiowa culture.
Yes.
You also point out in the book that change didn't happen to the Kiowas. They changed themselves. You have a comment on that?
Well, yeah, I think change is in the order of things. You know, it can be very dramatic and can be a story in itself. How do you change? I could talk for a long time about how the Kiowas came out of their, what I somewhere called the cellular memory of misfortune or hopelessness, the cellular memory of hopelessness. About the turn of the century, the Kiowas were defeated, depressed, hopeless. The death rate had begun to exceed the birth rate. Things couldn't have been worse, but they changed. They brought about their own survival. That's a big story. It's not only the Kiowa story, of course, it's the Indian story.
And The Way to Rainy Mountain concludes,
but indeed the golden age of the Kiowas had been short-lived, 90 or 100 years, say, from about 1740. The culture would persist for a while in decline until about 1875, and then it would be gone, and there would be very little material evidence that it had ever been.
When you read your work like that, you probably haven't read this for some time.
No, I haven't. You're right.
And so is it almost like you're reading somebody else's work?
Yeah.
And you can't imagine where your mind was that brought you to those words.
You write a book and then you put it behind you, and people ask you questions about it, and you sometimes have a hard time remembering. It's funny how that happens. And I have fun with it sometimes. People come up and say, Dr. Momaday, here in the names on page 142, you wrote this, and did you mean to be ironic, or is this a symbol? You know, I think about it for a moment. I say, of course. How can you doubt it? You know? And they know the passage better than I do.
Well, in the names, an autobiography, explain the title.
Well, names and naming is so important in Indian tradition. Names are like flags, coats of arms, identities. People have to live up to their names. And that can sometimes be a very strong challenge. To name something is to confer being on it. So if you think about it in that sense, you see how important the name-giving ceremony is.
A major theme of the book would be development of your Indianness, or what it consists of, and what ways you're part of the Indian heritage.
Mm-hmm. My Indian name is Tsoai Tali, Rock Tree Boy. There is a story about Devil's Tower, Wyoming, which the Kiowas called Soai, Rock Tree. I was taken there when I was an infant, and it's a very important sacred place to the Kiowas. So when I returned to Oklahoma with my parents, a man in the tribe came and gave me the name Rock Tree Boy to commemorate my having been taken to this place. The story about Soai involves a boy who turns into a bear, and I have always identified with that boy, and I have bear power. So it's very important to me.
When you say you have bear power, what does that mean?
I identify with the bear. I have ties with the bear. The bear is somehow in my disposition, in my makeup. It's the most important totem in my life, and that's not unusual for Indian people. But the story of the bear and the boy who turns into a bear is very meaningful to me.
This is actually what you said when you were a child in grade school, and a teacher asked you about being Indian.
Oh, I feel so dumb I can't answer all these questions. I don't know how to be a Kiowa Indian. My grandmother lives in a house. It's like your house, Miss Marshall, only it doesn't have lights and light switches and the toilet is outside. But that isn't what makes it Indian. It's my grandma, the way she is and looks, and her hair braids to the clothes somehow. Well, I don't know why it's an Indian house, because there are pictures of Indians on the walls, photographs of people with long braids and particular dress, I suppose. Mm-hmm. That's a stream of consciousness section in the names.
In The Way to Rainy Mountain, I was struck where you wrote, before there were horses, the Kiowas had need of dogs. That was a long time ago when dogs could talk. And it jumped out at me that in your inaugural poem for Governor Henry, you used that, when dogs could talk.
That's a fairly common expression in Kiowa, used to indicate something that is far back in time. This happened a long time ago when dogs could talk. I picked up on it because I like the notion of dogs talking. I like that expression.
And you write, there were always dogs about my grandmother's house.
Yeah. Dogs dogs are primordial. They go back as far as anyone knows. We do know that when the people were crossing the Bering Strait, they had dogs, beasts of burden. So the relationship between man and dog goes way back.
Did you become, because of that, a dog lover yourself?
Yes, probably because of that, yes.
Because we have a little one that's walking around sniffing at our feet right now.
Yeah.
Chihuahua, I guess it is?
It is, yeah. It's Consuelo's dog. He thinks he's a miniature Doberman.
This Rainy Mountain Cemetery from the book, The Way to Rainy Mountain.
Rainy Mountain Cemetery. Most is your name, the name of this dark stone. Deranged in death, the mind to be inheres, forever in the nominal unknown. The wake of nothing audible he hears, who listens here and now to hear your name. The early sun, red as a hunter's moon, runs in the plain. The mountain burns and shines. And silence is the long approach of noon upon the shadow that your name defines, and death, this cold, black density of stone.
Do you read that now that you haven't read that in many, many years? As well, that must have been a pretty good writer. But it's new to you now, isn't it?
Yeah, some of it certainly. There's a whole revolution of things. They go round, and what swings out swings back, and so on.
Names. You make issue of horsemanship. And this comes from your childhood, because you rode horses at Jemez.
Yes, at about the age of 12, when I moved to Jemez, my parents gave me a horse. And I spent a large part of my life on the back of that horse for the next few years. And I got to be a pretty good rider. And it pleases me that I had that opportunity because of the horsemanship of my ancestors. They were tremendous horse people. I got to claim that part of my heritage in a real way, and that meant a lot to me, too.
Here's what you wrote about on the back of a horse.
On the back of my horse, I had a different view of the world. I could see more of it, how it reached away beyond all of the horizons I had ever seen, and yet it was more concentrated in its appearance, too, and more accessible to my mind, my imagination. My mind loomed upon the farthest edges of the earth. There I could feel the full force of the planet whirling into space.
What kind of horse were you riding?
My parents gave me a roan gelding, strawberry roan, as they're called, and it was a quarter horse, probably less than 1,000 pounds, but a wonderful animal. It was gentle. It was very fast and competitive.
So you were good in races?
Yeah, I was very good. Or to put it more accurately, my horse was very good. I used to race a lot, and I rarely lost.
And the horse's name?
Pecos.
So this writing experience was an exercise of the mind, to use your words, and a phrase you use when writing about Billy the Kid in The Ancient Child. Why Billy the Kid?
Well, Billy the Kid is an icon, and particularly well known and regarded, I think, in New Mexico, where he lived most of his life. When I was a kid in New Mexico, I knew about Billy the Kid. People talked about him. I read the saga of Billy the Kid when I was quite young. So he became an important imaginary character in my mind. I used to play games in which he and I would ride out. We rode the range together. So he's been important to me in my life, and very controversial now.
As a matter of fact, today that we're talking about Billy the Kid, USA Today, December 20th of 2010, the headline is, Billy the Kid, Writing History or Rewriting It. It says Governor Bill Richardson of New Mexico is trying to reach back more than 130 years to decide whether to pardon Billy the Kid, who historians believe killed as many as 9 men. What's the issue here?
The issue really is whether he was pardoned or whether he was promised a pardon by Lew Wallace, who was the governor of the territory when Billy was around. There are a great many people who think that that promise should be honored. Of course, there are a great many people who think that Billy the Kid was a cold-blooded killer who deserves nothing. The story may lie somewhere in between. I think Billy the Kid was a lost soul in the sense that he was alone and led an interesting, exemplary life in some ways. He was very loyal. He liked people. He liked having fun. He was a kid, but he was deadly. Makes him very romantic, quite a figure.
Billy the Kid was an alias for William Bonney,
which was an alias for Henry McCarty.
The promise was that the governor would annul Bonney's indictment in the murder of Sheriff William Brady in return for testimony against 3 men in the slaying of an innocent one-armed lawyer.
The story becomes richer and richer as you get under the surface. Billy did shoot at Brady. There were several men who ambushed Brady, and he fell. He probably was dead before he hit the ground. I think he had 9 bullet holes in him. We don't know whether Billy really killed him. More likely, several people killed him.
He was the only one identified of at least 6 participants in the ambush.
Right.
And so, eventually, the federal government, tired of the slayings and a new Governor Wallace, who later wrote the book Ben-Hur.
Mm-hmm. Having nothing to do with Billy the Kid, I trust.
Right. So, here we have Governor Richardson in modern-day time, December 20th, 2010, asking the public to weigh in on this, because there are those who say, yes, Billy the Kid should be pardoned. Mm-hmm. Family members of the sheriff are saying, no, it should not be. So it's an alive argument today.
Exactly.
Where do you come down on this issue?
Oh, I think he should be pardoned. I think Billy the Kid has been given a bum deal in some ways. He had his good features, and of course he was a very dangerous and romantic man. So I liked the idea of keeping the legend alive, and pardoning him would be one way in which to do it.
Maybe it'll show up in a future writing. Who knows?
Who knows?
But after the names, you didn't publish anything for about 12 years. In that period of time, painting then became important to you.
Yeah, painting became important to me in the 70s. I was in Russia. I had watched my father paint without myself becoming terribly interested in becoming a painter. But when I was in Russia, all of this osmosis, all of the days I had watched my father became something that I began to develop. So that's the beginning of my painting career. Started drawing and then went into painting and printmaking.
Wasn't that thrilled to start drawing and realize that, wow, that's good stuff? Because others had to reaffirm, probably.
You know, the challenge of creativity is very strong, and it hit me there pretty hard, and I started drawing and have progressed from that point.
And then the fact that the Kiowas have a long tradition of painting.
Yes, that's true.
Do you enjoy painting to this day?
Yes, I do. I'm sporadic about it. I'm more consistent with my writing, but I do love to paint and draw, and I love to make prints.
You became aware of the correspondence between painting and writing?
Well, yes. The two things for me go together pretty well. I like to break away from writing because it takes such concentration. You really give yourself over to writing, and you can't do much else when you're writing. With painting, it's not quite the same way. It's not as concentrated. I can listen to a ball game or music or something while I'm painting, but with writing, no. So it's a kind of relief to go from writing to painting.
You're working on inspiration, both in writing and in painting.
Yes.
And you don't get up every morning and say, well, I have to start writing today.
I like the idea of keeping a strong or a very orderly kind of routine, but I don't have the kind of discipline that some people have who can work a 9-to-5 day. I have to be more sporadic about it.
So one day you could work 8-9 hours at it, and the next day maybe nothing.
True. Quite true.
Writer's block, and you know you want to write. Has it hit you?
I don't believe in writer's block. Maybe I ought to. I know that some people really do. But I don't think that there is such a thing. I think, the mind works in such a way that it produces in a creative gear, as it were, and then it needs some kind of change or relief. And so you stop. You stop writing, and you wait until the inspiration comes again, and it always does. But to talk about that relief as block, writer's block, I don't quite see that.
The brain just gets tired sometimes, I guess, huh?
It gets tired and it gets bored, Doing the same thing all the time is probably a way to run down. You need to change of pace.
Talking about your painting now, one of your first exhibitions in 1979 at the University of North Dakota Art Galleries. I take special note of that because that's my hometown, Grand Forks, North Dakota, where the University of North Dakota is. Mm-hmm. You had a collection of paintings of Indian war shields there.
That was my first exhibit, shields, and I still am fascinated with the idea of shields, what they are, what they mean.
You planned a book of shields. Did you do that book?
Well, it's a part of In the Presence of the Sun. I have a whole section on shields with illustrations. I've drawn the shields.
Then you have a series of paintings on Indian dolls?
Yes, I did. I haven't kept that together, so I don't know what has become of it, but I got very much interested in dolls, and I painted a series of Indian dolls.
It's thought that maybe some of your most impressive paintings are the watercolor series on Billy the Kid.
Yes, I did that some years ago. Turned out well as far as I was concerned.
A bit about the ancient child. Here's where we have the bear coming to play, the ancient child. He changes into a bear, chases his sisters up a tree. And you've been, as you've commented, fascinated with the figure of the bear throughout your life.
I am the boy who turned into a bear, the incarnation of that.
While we're talking about bears, in the bear's house.
Well, a part of the book is called the Bear-God Dialogues, conversations between God and the original bear.
And the original bear is named Urset, and then God is named
Yahweh.
This section here is where Urset says, I've been thinking that I would like to pray, but I don't know how. You and I could play the parts here.
Okay.
So Urset says, I've been thinking that I would like to pray, but I don't know how.
Why, that's nonsense. Of course you know how to pray. You knew from the day you were born. I saw to that. It is a thing that I give to all my creatures.
But I don't know what prayer is. How can I know how to pray? Tell me, please, what is prayer?
It's talking to God, Urset, simply that. And it's the silence from which your words proceed.
Am I praying now, great mystery?
Even as we speak.
Do you pray, may I ask?
Devoutly, unceasingly. It's what I do. It's what I am.
Would you be so kind as to make a prayer for me just now, for me?
I pray that you are kept safe throughout this day, that you live as holy as you can, that you see things as you have not seen them before, as that more of them are beautiful than not, more of them delightful than not. I pray that you hold easily in your hands the balance of the earth and sky, that you laugh and cry, know freedom and restraint, some joy and some sorrow, pleasure and pain, much of life and a little of death. I pray that you are grateful for the gift of your being, and I pray that you celebrate your life in the proper way, with grace and humility, wonder and contentment, in the strong, deep current of your Spirit's voice. I pray that you are happily in love in the dawn, and that you are more deeply in love in the dusk. Amen.
Amen.
Early this morning, Ursette, when you walked along Frijoles Creek, what was it I heard you say?
I said, the morning is crisp and bright. I expect something to define the air momently, perhaps the shrill of a rabbit or a wren. The water of Frijoles Creek runs southward through splinters of sunlight and patterns of shade. It runs without urgency as I walk. It keeps the faster pace, and I proceed steadily, like the pilgrims of Chamayo, and in one nature to the edge of the world. I hear among the stony churns of the creek words that I heard from an old man when I was young.
Muy bonita dia. It's a beautiful day.
Our laughter, his and mine, rose upon the cliffs of Tuff close by. It is the first of all mornings, and it is unspeakably old. And Yahweh said, Amen.
Amen.
In the new poems, you have a collection of epigrams.
Yeah, those are epigrams and epitaphs. I'm fond of writing those things. They're sometimes funny, and they're addictive. You know, it's a bit like eating peanuts. You start writing epitaphs and you can't stop. So I do have a number of them among my poems.
And I think some of those would come to you. Our friend Robert Henry tells me as you were swimming laps.
Yeah, when I went to Tucson to begin my final teaching stint at the University of Arizona, I was not used to the Tucson summers. When I went there, I wanted to find out how I could deal with the heat. And I decided that, well, it's mandatory to have a swimming pool. So I bought a house with a swimming pool, and I began swimming laps. Very boring activity, swimming laps. So I started composing epitaphs as I swam. And I have 2-lap epitaphs, 4-lap epitaphs, and so on. Here's a 2-lapper called The Death of Beauty. She died a beauty of repute, her other virtues in dispute. And one on chastity. Here lies a lady sweet and chaste. Here lies the matter, chaste makes waste.
There are others, you call those 2-lappers. There are 4-lappers you can remember?
I had to give a speech to a group of ceramicists in Tempe, Arizona. So I went up there not knowing much about this organization, but they were very funny. They all wore little pottery name tags. There were more of them than I could have imagined, and well organized, from all over the world. So when I got home, I jumped in the pool and I started composing an epitaph that goes like this. Here lies the potter Momaday, who has himself become his clay, and lest his memory be forgot, recycle him into a pot.
These just start flowing with you, don't they? Huh?
Yeah,
there's a rhythm to them, and
they're very well crafted, if I may say so myself.
So you're a painter, a poet, a novelist, a professor, and a cook, aren't you?
I have been in my day, yeah. I enjoy cooking and I like food, so I combine the two things.
You enjoy being a member of the Kiowa Gourd Dance Society?
Yes, that's very important to me. That's one of the chief societies in the tribe. I've been a member for quite a few years.
That is a dance?
There is a gourd dance, and this society does the dance in July every year.
And what are we to draw from that? What is the meaning of all that?
It's a soldier society, and it commemorates the heyday of the tribe.
I think this is interesting, about Christianity and the American Indian community. While Christianity meant nothing but good, do you think that as they came, maybe as missionaries, that they also didn't work to preserve the culture of the Indians, but there was a conversion process going on here, if you converted to Christianity and maybe even to the white man's culture?
That is an old story, yes. I lived at Jemez when I was a boy, 12 years old, and up till the time I was about 17. It was interesting to see how the church, the Catholic Church, existed there, along with the tribal religion. The two have coexisted, let's say, for 400 years, and they seem to do it successfully. I often wondered, in a crisis, which claims your greater loyalty? And I don't know the answer to that. I know that the Indian religion is alive and well. It's very strong. And certainly the people at Jemez consider themselves Christians. They go to Mass. They bury their dead in the Camposanto. But they also have this other and older religion. How they keep the two things alive is perhaps a mystery.
Well, there was, in the Indian religion, the use of peyote. There was a time where they attempted to get it banned by federal law. As a matter of fact, in 1916, Representative Harry Gandhi of South Dakota, Senator Thompson of Kansas introduced legislation to outlaw peyote, but it took a senator from Oklahoma, Senator Robert L. Owen, to block and ultimately defeat that. That was a close call to the Indians, wasn't it?
Yes. Had it been outlawed, I'm not sure what difference it might have made, but I think it would have made a difference.
And then they organized a Native American church.
Yes. The original users of peyote were in the South, like the Kiowas and the Comanches in the southern plains, because of the proximity of peyote in Mexico. But when the church was started, it became widespread all over the nation. Still, the source of peyote remains in the South.
What is peyote?
It's a hallucinogenic drug that grows in Mexico. You take it in various ways. You can smoke it, you can drink it as a tea, and it produces visions. So for the Plains tribes, like the Kiowas and the Comanches, who were big on the vision quest, it seemed a natural way to go because of the hallucinatory effect.
Have you smoked peyote?
I've tried it, yeah. I don't do it regularly, but I've had peyote.
So they use it now in the sacrament, I guess, of the church.
Yeah, I guess you can call it that. I've never attended a Native American church ceremony, but I have an idea of what it is based on an older ceremony.
That's practiced even today, then?
Oh, yes.
How would you explain to someone who knows nothing about writing why it is so exciting and so important to you?
I think writers are driven to write. I think there is a compulsion that comes with the cells, the genes. And if you have that compulsion, you can't resist it. You must write. So I am such a person, I believe, and most of the writers I know are such people. You either have it or you don't. The urge and the ability. Those who have it have to be true to it.
The road to success can take many turns, and there are certainly roadblocks and detours. I'm sure you've had setbacks along the way. And what did you learn from them? I mean, how did you deal with those setbacks?
I can't think of a setback. I think I have been fortunate to have achieved a reputation as a writer, but that doesn't seem terribly important to me. I don't think I write for success. I write because I can. As William Gass once said when somebody asked him for whom he wrote, if I remember rightly, he said, well, I don't write for myself. That would be self-serving. I don't write for an audience. That would be pandering. I write for the thing that is trying to be born. And that's pretty much how I look at it. I have the creative ability to produce something, and that's the main thing. If you do that, you have fulfilled your promise.
You're sitting next to a computer here. How do you write today on that computer?
Yeah, I have an interesting history of writing. I started out longhand, and then I went to a typewriter when typewriters were ancient machines. I had a Smith Corona that is a museum relic. Then I went to these fancy typewriters, IBM, the ones that use the ball. I remember I was using that for a long time. And then I went to the computer. Basically, I write on a computer, but I always keep a pad and pencil nearby, and I go back and forth.
How do you deal with criticism? Certainly there are those who have been critics of your work.
Well, I don't deal with it. I have been offended by reviews that are critical, but not much and not for very long. I think that people are entitled to their opinion and they can say what they want. But I also think the writer has the right to be judged by his peers, those who know what he's up to and what he's about and can really make an accurate judgment. And there are a lot of critics who don't fill that bill. But I've learned to ignore most critics. I don't read reviews much, and I don't pay attention to them when I do.
Any issues? Is there some idea or problem that holds your attention here in 2010?
I have fears for the world. I think that global warming is real and dangerous. I think that we have the capacity to make war, devastating war, and we have the means, I suppose, to annihilate ourselves. So those things are important. I'm not a pessimist. I think generally in a positive way about things. But there's a lot to worry about in our current lives.
Environmentalists and Indians, are they viewing the earth in the same manner?
To some degree, yeah. The Native American, the American Indian has been on this continent, for many thousands of years. In that tenure, he has learned a lot about how to live on harmonious terms with the earth. So he has a lot to teach others. And those among the other society who are concerned about the health of the planet and the preservation of wilderness and so on, there's a lot they have in common.
I read where so-called Western man thinks of Earth as dead matter, Indians think of Earth as living matter.
I think that's true, yeah. To generalize, the Indian has a sense that the Earth is living matter, it has a spirit, and by and large, Western civilization doesn't feel that way. Again, to generalize, they think of it as dead matter and something that can be harvested. They don't pay attention to the welfare of future generations.
Georgia O'Keeffe, artist who spent much of her time here in New Mexico, was inspired by what she saw in New Mexico. Did you have any kind of friendship, or did you meet her?
Yes, I knew Georgia O'Keeffe in the early 70s. She lived at Abiquiu at the time, and I would go up and visit with her, take her to lunch, and chat with her about different things. She was a wonderful person, and a great artist, I think.
She was complimentary of your painting, I would imagine.
I don't know that she knew much about my painting, but she knew about my writing. Yeah, she was complimentary.
In this series, I've interviewed Wilma Mankiller of the Cherokees. Did you ever know her?
Oh, yes. She was a dear friend.
How did that come about?
I don't remember how we met, but no doubt it was at some function. She was with the Ford Foundation, so she knew about my application for a grant, and I got it. I think she must have had something to do with it. And I saw her on numerous other occasions. There was a major celebration at Tahlequah of the Cherokee tribe, and I was a guest of honor there, and she was responsible for that too, I think.
Because you have a little bit of Cherokee in you.
Yes, I do.
Through your mother.
Right.
You received the National Medal of Arts in 2007 from George W. Bush, and you go to the White House. Was that an impressionable experience for you, being with the president there?
Yes, and with the other recipients, I met some people that are truly achievers. So it was a great honor, yes. I was moved to be a part of that occasion.
Even as we sit here today, December 21st, 2010, you have new work that's about to be published.
That's right. I've got a book of poems that is in press. I have finished the proofreading, and so I think in February or March, perhaps, that book will be out. It's called Again the Far Morning, and it has a number of poems and prose passages that I've written over the years. Since I submitted that for publication, I've been working on a new book, and I think I have almost enough to submit.
So here at 75, and the imagination is still cooking. And
still cooking.
You have 20 years at least of this cooking, don't you?
Yes.
But let's go back to the young person now who will listen to this because of our website, voicesofoklahoma.com, and today's technology. What do you say to young people who want to be a writer?
I say, if you have the motivation, if you have the temperament, if you think that you must write, then do it with all your strength. Read people whose work you admire and try to understand why you admire it. Write. There's no substitute for writing consistently. You don't have to write deathless prose or poetry every day, but you must strive for that. You want to do the best you can. You have to find your voice, and once you've found it, you must be true to it. It's not easy. Writing can be very frustrating. You'll find that out if you go along the path. But it is worth it. I once heard a writer being interviewed on the radio, and the interviewer asked him that question that all interviewers must ask. Is it hard to write? Is it difficult to write? And the writer paused for a moment and he said, oh, no, it's very easy. All you do is put a piece of paper in the machine and then look at it until beads of blood appear on your forehead. In a sense, that's true. I have had the experience of putting a piece of paper in the machine and nothing happens over 4 hours. And by that time, you're ready to expire. If, on the other hand, you write a sentence or a paragraph and understand that it's the best that was in you, there's no satisfaction quite like that. It's worth everything.
Then that 4 or 5 hours was a good investment.
Yeah, had to be made.
As Poet Laureate of our state, Oklahoma, in 2007, you traveled to many of our schools and probably talked about what you just said.
Yes, that was a great experience, too.
Well, I want to thank you for what you've done here, and I would like for you to finish by reading from the inaugural poem which you wrote for Governor Brad Henry. You have about 3-4 verses here that I'd like for you to read as we end our good time that we've had with you today.
Sure, good. From the ice where raven flies, from the north where silence lies, there came the people with dogs, long ago when dogs could talk. There came the people with fire, long ago, when fire could freeze. There came the people with words, long ago, when words were omnipotent. There came the people with words, and of the words they made a story, long ago. According to the story, the people followed the sun. The people prayed to the sun. The people danced to the sun. The people made a pilgrimage along the path of the sun. The pilgrimage came to this. The sun dancing came to this. The destiny of the people came to this. Oklahoma. Oklahoma is the name of the sun's house. Oklahoma is the name of an ancient quest. Oklahoma is the name of a great destiny.
There's more to that, but that was a segment that I've asked you to read for us as we finish our interview. And as we hear your voice and the way you speak, I mean, you've lent your voice to The Last Stand at the Little Bighorn episode of The American Experience, the Disney Channel. You voiced many exhibits, Museum of the American Indian at the Smithsonian Institution, frequent contributor to National Public Radio. You know what I'm saying, Scott? How does one man have all this talent in one body? You are indeed a fortunate man.
I understand that I'm fortunate. I don't know the answer to that question, except you outlive everything around you, and eventually you make it.
Well, thank you for this time.
You're welcome, and I thank you, John. It's been a pleasure.
You have been listening to the Voices of Oklahoma podcast, stories taken from the oral history website, voicesofoklahoma.com. At the website, you will discover an array of storytellers. Many you will know. Some will be new to you, but all will be worth your time. This work depends on listeners like you, who are interested in learning about the great people of Oklahoma. Our website provides an opportunity to donate to this 501c3 project, which preserves Oklahoma history, one voice at a time. voicesofoklahoma.com.